Welcome in, Gridiron 360, Dave and Bill. We're talking fantasy football here. Going to do a little season-long fantasy football discussion. We're going to continue on the path that we've done, but try to tighten it up in terms of looking back to last week, performers by position group, and then we'd like to spend a little more time on previewing the upcoming week for seasonal, maybe start sit. Some people with matchups that might have opportunities for big games, so on and so forth. So let's dive right in, shall we?
Sure.
Let's go into the running back position group from week 11 in fantasy football. And similar names, at least one name we always see at the top, Mr. Christian McCaffrey. Seems to be leading the pack.
Like he's good or something.
Yeah, man, the guy's crazy. 14 attempts on the ground, 70 yards, 14 targets for the year, 11 receptions, 121 yards. Didn't see the end zone and still leads the list. You have Todd Gurley at second. Todd Gurley sighting, ladies and gentlemen. Todd Gurley sighting.
Against the Bears.
Yeah, 25 for 97 on the ground and a TD, 3 for 36 through the air. He did lose a fumble. Mark Ingram comes in at number 3. Dang gummit, why didn't I play him? Alvin Kamara at number 4. Definitely saw the Saints make him a focal point in this past week's game after that terrible loss at home to the Falcons. On the road at Tampa Bay, definitely, even though Tampa Bay's got a good rush D and a bad secondary, got him involved both ways. 13 for 75 on the ground. 10 targets of the year, 10 receptions, 47 yards. Didn't see the end zone either, but still had a nice day. That's number 4. Zeke comes in at number 5. That's your top 5.
Yep. I think kind of interesting is Le'Veon Bell. Kind of, not that you lean on him, but not particularly efficient at 18 for 59 yards, but did get in the end zone and caught a couple of passes. So I don't want to scream for life, but those Le'Veon Bell owners that took him early this year get a little something. For the effort. Yeah,
other names that are kind of up there, surprising, not surprising. I guess Tariq Cohen came in pretty high. He's like top 10, it looks like, or just outside. That Marlon Mack was behind Le'Veon Bell, but unfortunately he's hurt. Josh Jacobs, another good day. Mixon. Eckler, great day, whereas Melvin Gordon, not a bad day, but not as good as Eckler, considering Gordon's the lead back there. Dalvin Cook slipping off a little bit. Not a horrible day, but not what we expect from him. 11 carries, 26 yards in TD, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 31 receiving yards.
How about Jonathan Williams for Indianapolis being in the just outside the top 10, considering that Marlon Mack was, Oh, wait, hold on. Is this reset on me?
Yeah,
no.
You didn't do something
Who's out?
right. But he is a guy to look at, and we'll talk about that in forward projections. But I will say in the top, looks like top 25, 4, 3, 2, 1, 19. Bo Scarborough, the former beast out of Alabama. Getting some, coming up, getting elevated from the practice squad for Detroit and getting some run. 14 for 55 and a touchdown. Nothing phenomenal, but he is a load to handle. I'm wondering why we haven't seen more of him yet. He performed all right. At the bottom of that top 25, coming back really last week, I think he came back off an injury, and this week kind of solidifying himself more, is Darius Geis for the Redskins. 7 carries, 24 yards, 2 targets to the air with 1 reception that went for 45 and a TD on that. That was pretty. Otherwise, he would have had an ugly day. But as we forward look, maybe there's more involvement with Geis.
Yep.
Let's go over to the wide receivers from last week. Why don't you get us kicking?
All right, make sure I get this working here for me. All right, so week 11.
Who is it? Because I had him.
It's not coming up. Can't get it to update.
It is Mr. John Brown from the Buffalo Bills. Goes 14 targets, 9 receptions. Keep in mind, Brown is getting that type of target load. Maybe not up to 14, but he's getting close to the 10 target load, which is great every week. 9 receptions, 137 yards, and 2 TDs. And yes, it was against Miami, but hopefully you played him. It would have been not smart not to. I don't care if you have, Julio Jones. More than likely, you don't have 3 number 1 receivers to the level of like a Julio Jones, DeAndre Hopkins.
Michael Thomas.
Michael Thomas as your 3 receivers. So more than likely, if you had John Brown, that second, third receiver slot, if it wasn't one of those top guys, you might have been questioning play him, but hopefully you did because it would have been smart with the matchup. DJ Chark, who we highlighted in our DFS, he had a good day.
2 scores. Yeah, he's got
2
a thing
scores,
going with
8
Mr.
for
Foles.
104. Problem I have there is he had 15 targets and only caught just over half of them. That you got to get better there. Calvin Ridley, the bane of my existence.
He still plays. We didn't know that with Matt Ryan for a long time.
At 4, Michael Thomas, man. Again, 11 targets, 8 receptions, 114 yards, 1 TD every single week. It doesn't matter who it is, who the Saints have at quarterback or on offense or who they don't. This guy is incredible.
He is.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Michael Gallup.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't his counterpart.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, Amari Cooper. But Gallup with a great day, and we highlighted it in our NFL recap. In the good, the bad, the ugly, one of our goods was wide receiver play. He had some incredible catches in this game that we highlighted. He goes 13 targets, 9 of those caught, 148 yards. Stephon Diggs came into play, Randall Cobb, 2 Dallas wide receivers not named Amari Cooper in the top 10.
Yep.
Deebo Samuel, there's a lot of talk about him this week after coming off a good week the prior week. Even though it was in a loss to Seattle, he had a good week. This week they got Arizona. Kittle was out. Emmanuel Sanders went into the game, did play, but he was banged up. Deebo Samuel was a guy a lot of people looked to kind of pick up that slack, and I would say he did. 10 targets, 8 receptions, 134 yards.
Yep.
Good day. What else he got out there? Anything to note?
Well, kind of interesting. You would think in a game with Tampa that they're going to play New Orleans and get into a shootout, and they've got those big-time receivers in Mike Evans and Godwin. Godwin got the better of the day, but was not tremendous. Again, it was one of those bad Jameis games. He was 3 for 47, did score a touchdown, so that helped. But Mike Evans, he was 4 for 69 and no score. So there were some guys that didn't get it done. Christian Kirk came back down to earth, had his one big game with 3 touchdowns, and then he went 6 for 41. OBJ, unfortunately, that's kind of been the scenario. Very little there. Those are some of probably the bigger names. Cooper Kupp, that one continues to surprise me significantly.
Me too.
I'm almost wondering if there's an injury in play, but the reality is his biggest injury is that his quarterback blows. Because I give the Rams credit for somehow being able to be 6-4 with Goff because he's bad. And what was more interesting in this game is they were without their other 2 receivers in Brandon Cooks and Robert Woods. So those were kind of some of the surprising ones. You would think not only just the fact that he hasn't really been shut out, and then you mentioned Amari Cooper, but it was just the ball went the other way, and that's just really what it was.
Cortland Sutton, I think he just sits outside the top 10 Denver wide receiver, and I bring him up because they were up actually big in this at Minnesota, and Minnesota stormed back to win. But moreover, we've talked in the past, Emmanuel Sanders now gone from Denver. Last year when Emmanuel Sanders was out because of injury and it was all on Sutton, he didn't really dazzle. Yep. He seems to be doing it. And not on top of that, not just the fact that Sanders is gone, but with, third string, Brandon Allen at quarterback. But he's still getting it done. I mean, the kid had 2 carries for 10 yards, had 9 targets, 5 of those receptions for $113. That's not bad considering the situations he's in. A couple other names in the top 25 that really just came out of nowhere. Miami wide receiver Jakeem Grant. He had 3 targets in the game, but caught all 3 for 32 yards and a score. You have a guy like Marcus Johnson, receiver for Indianapolis. 4 targets, 4 receptions, 38 yards, and a TD. Kendrick Bourne from San Francisco got involved. 6 targets, 4 receptions, 31 yards, and a TD. Pharaoh Cooper on the other side of the ball in that game, wide receiver for Arizona. 4 targets, 3 receptions, 35 yards, and a TD. So some names that are starting to pop up, and based on injury and situations those teams are in, You may see them, and we may discuss them as potential flyers in the coming week based on matchups. Let's move over to quarterbacks. You got it up. You want? I'll let you roll with that one.
All right, we got. Interestingly, everybody knows how great Lamar Jackson played this week against Houston. Tough team. Thought this was going to be a track meet.
He was the number one quarterback this week.
He was
wasn't
not.
He?
That is what my point is. Very interesting. He and just to continue on Lamar Jackson, only had 222 yards through the air, but did have 4 scores. But as we know with him, he offsets that with tremendous running ability. He was 9 for 86 on the ground. Finished in our league with a setup with 45.98 points. But to be outdone by Dak Prescott, we mentioned their two. The two touchdown or the two
must have been the Dak dance.
Probably. It was the two guys that you mentioned before, not Amari Cooper. Got 444 yards in the air and 3 scores. Also put 6 attempts for 18 yards on the ground. He was slinging it in this game and blew it up. What was kind of interesting was the arrival of a couple of other guys. We had Josh Allen next, who, fantasy can produce, but we had guys like Jeff Driscoll, Kyler Murray in the top 10. Sam Darnold made it in the top 10. Sam Darnold. He had 293 yards, 4 touchdowns. Did have 1 pick and a couple of rushes for negative yards. But those are, these are ahead of guys like Drew Brees.
Keep in mind that is against the Redskins.
True, but again against
Drew
Brees. They got a
short field a couple times.
They got above Pat Mahomes. Pat Mahomes had a rough week. Only had 1 touchdown, but had an interception. Only 182 yards in their win. Did run the ball 5 times for 59 yards. Not that they're huge fantasy players, but still names. Ahead of Tom Brady. Phillip Rivers, who used to be a pretty good fantasy player.
That in the preview. I'm worried about Phil.
Yeah, Phil had 4 picks, so it was an ugly day. Did put up 353 yards, had 1 touchdown, but his interceptions and his throwing, so he is, I think, falling out. And then Deshaun Watson, again, the guy we expected probably to be in if Lamar's going to be in there, we expected Deshaun to be there. Yeah. Had a rough game, spent a lot of time running around and getting sacked. He only had 169 yards and a pick and a couple of short rushes. So, interesting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Baker Mayfield on Thursday night, he's up there probably right outside the top 10, it looks like. But that's solely on touchdowns. He did run a touchdown in. He had, 27 passes, only 193 yards. So, it's not – that's a lot of passes, not even 10 yards an attempt. Had 2 touchdowns through the air, and then again, the one I said he scored on the ground, giving him 3 touchdowns total. That kind of salvages fantasy day. Another guy that I just wanted to touch on, Jameis Winston, goes. How many attempts did he have? Oh, he had 313. No. Yeah, he had 313 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns, 4 picks. Again, not a great Jameis Winston day. But I'll say this, on as bad of a day as it was, he's still top 20 in fantasy. And that happens with Winston. If people want to play him because of the matchup, because it's things that, it sucks when he has a Jameis Winston day because you want to have the better or even less than a Jameis Winston bad day to make it even better from fantasy. But even on a bad day, he can be useful.
Yeah, he throws for a lot of yards. I think he's in the top 3 in yardage this year. So
Yep.
But those picks start to deduct.
Yep, they do. So let's move on to the tight end position group.
Tight ends was kind of interesting. Usually this is top 3 or 4, and you get some good love, and then it gets ugly from there. There was actually a fair amount of production out of the tight end position. Leading the day in points was Ryan Griffin. He had 5 receptions, 109 yards, and scored one of those Sam Darnold touchdowns.
He's obviously someone that Darnold is, targeting, someone he looks at. The guy has had, a few games this year which have been really, really nice in terms of fantasy production where you're like, man, I wish I had, put him on my team playing this week.
Sure, yeah. You had in the top 5, you had some of your big guns, and Travis Kelce, he was number 2 with 792 for 92 and a touchdown. Zach Ertz, 9 for 94. He's starting to get involved in the offense. You had Mark Andrews at number 5, 4 for 75 and a touchdown. interesting one is Kyle Rudolph. Kyle Rudolph is starting to find the end zone in this offense.
He's not throwing up huge numbers in terms of targets.
No.
And he's averaged exactly 5 targets the past 3 weeks and has had 3, 4, and 5 receptions on those targets respectively, 23 yards, 14 yards, and 16 yards respectively on those targets. But from the touchdown pool, he's 1, 2, and 1. So you're right. He's finding the end zone, and for a tight end, that is very valuable.
Yeah, and the one guy missing that we're used to seeing is George Kittle. He was out. And in his replacement, it was first name Ryan. I think it's Ryan. Ross Dwelly. And woo.
And there was a lot of talk about him going into this week simply because Arizona gives it up to the tight ends. They have been all season long. They were banged up all over the place on the offense. And, most importantly with Kittle being out. And so in comes Ross Dwelly, and, well, he performed.
Yeah, and it really, wasn't
2
a big
TDs, man.
It wasn't big numbers from the catches and the receiving, as he was 4 for 14, but 2 touchdowns. So unlike Kittle kind of is a little bit different. Kittle's usually the guy driving down the middle of the field. Not that he can't score touchdowns, but he's involved in the offense all the way through. It looks like this guy was a red zone gem. And they went after it. It was nice to see some other ones.
He's a gem.
Waller kind of getting back. I think some of this has to do with the ability that, like a Hunter Renfrow has started to climb up a little bit. You've obviously got not Mike Williams, Tyrell Williams.
You got the Doss kid in there.
Yeah, and they were getting looks for a few weeks where Waller wasn't. I think now it's opened up a little bit more, and that's bringing Waller back into the game because he's certainly a talented target. So you got that one there. Those were some big ones that we had. We always kind of talk about it with tight ends. If you're not usually in the top 4 or 5 for the week, you're looking at maybe like 3 catches and 30 yards kind of thing. But there was a fair amount of guys that got activity and got touchdowns. So it was actually a better tight end week than we've seen in the past. Some guys like Dawson Knox, Irv Smith Jr. got in the end zone. Sprinkles.
Jeremy Sprinkles. Washington Redskins.
Yeah, and Moreau, the tight end for Oakland. What do they call? I forgot when they did the highlight. What do they call that? The island of Dr. Moreau. They made a little comment. Yeah, so he got a touchdown. So, again, it's kind of some of the stuff we're seeing, and it was a pretty good week for tight ends if you had one of these guys.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's jump right into Week 12 projections. Who we think's going to do well? The matchups. Maybe some random guys if you need a player. This is the last week of buys for the NFL.
Yep.
So let me pull that up and give us our bye teams. But let's talk.
I can tell you right now. I know Minnesota is on a bye. I know that Kansas City is on a bye because Dalvin Cook and P. Mahomes aren't going to be running for me this week. So that's unfortunate for me, Mr. Pickford.
Yep. Arizona, Kansas City, the Los Angeles Chargers are on the bye.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's right.
And Minnesota, you said Minnesota. Arizona, Kansas City, Chargers, Minnesota, all on the bye. Last week of buys. So if you need guys to sub in for somebody you have on one of those teams, somebody you need to pick up, or due to injury or what have you, we'll try to hit some of those. So let's start out with running backs. You start us out.
All right. Well, kind of looking at where everybody stands, certainly the number one name that's always out there is Christian McCaffrey. He's got a matchup against New Orleans. New Orleans can get out there and maybe score on him. That wasn't a good look for Carolina last week when they got shellacked by the Falcons. But the simple fact is McCaffrey gets touches every which way. Yep. If he doesn't make it in the running, he makes it up with the catching. If he doesn't get the running and the catching going, he still scores touchdowns. This guy's just a complete guy. But probably the best matchup of the week. The only thing that's kind of interesting about it is the addition of a running man with him is Nick Chubb. He gets Miami this week.
I love it.
So
I got me some Chubb.
Yeah, and I got to say that even with that, the way that Cleveland has run with Kareem Hunt, he's an interesting play this week too as well, just given that matchup and just the way they're kind of starting to evolve that offense. Another big one who finally kind of was able to get out of the gates this year is Alvin Kamara going back up against Carolina, so going the other way.
And Carolina, though, last week they don't have any superstar running back for Atlanta, and it was kind of a running back by committee. And let's be honest, they threw the ball a lot.
Yep.
But Carolina's defense has been giving it up to the running backs. Yep. And the focus that New Orleans put on Kamara in last week's game to get back on track with Tampa Bay, I fully expect as we're moving into the stretch and they're trying to get themselves hitting on all cylinders, that to continue. And that spells a lot of trouble with Carolina, especially since this is a divisional game, and not that Carolina's going to steal the first place in the division from New Orleans, but coach like Sean Payton, Breeze, that team, I think they don't want to leave any doubt, and I think this could be a big one for Kamara, maybe the biggest one he's had this season.
Yeah, I mean, he clearly looked right for the first time we've seen him. I think he was out so long, it was hard for him to get going. And you got to remember, Breeze is also getting back, too. So the dynamic of that offense shifted pretty drastically 2 different times during the season. First, when all those guys went out, especially with Breeze, and then again when they shifted back to those guys. Because remember, when it was Bridgewater, Latavius Murray was there pounding the rock. It was just a different kind of show. Effective, but a different show. Some interesting other matchups. Derrick Henry, this is a 5-5 Tennessee team that needs to win, and when he's running, they're winning. So they need him to have a big game. He can do that against Jacksonville.
Yeah, I mean, the last time they played, because this is a divisional matchup, was Game 3 of the year. It was at Jacksonville. Henry had 17 attempts, 44 yards, and a TD. So not great, but not bad.
Yeah.
But I got to be honest. Since then, though, for the majority of the season, he's been pretty darn good, lighting it up. They're coming off a bye too, so
he runs. If you want to even look back to last year he did not start the year off very well with them, but he was unbelievable. If you look at what he did in the second half of the season last year, he had one game where he had 200 plus yards and 3 scores. He's the kind of guy, you get him going not just throughout the game, but get him going throughout the season. It appears to be the kind of back that just gets better. I love Josh Jacobs against the Jets because I love Josh Jacobs.
Let's talk about a little interesting scenario here. Mm-hmm. Leonard Fournette is playing the Jacksonville running back Tennessee, right?
Right, yep.
And Fournette's had a great year. A little down last week, but for the most part, he's had a great year. And he is their workhorse. Mm-hmm. With Foles back, it does. Being that last week Foles came back, he didn't have as great of a game as he's been having. That does worry me a little bit. If you've got him, you're firing him up. He is an RB1. But how about this? LSU running back going against Alabama running back, and they played each other in college. And here they go. Henry and Fournette facing each other. Is there a little extra motivation there? Yeah,
maybe. And then what the other part is their running style, too, the downhill punishing running style that they play, and the kind of guys maybe that aren't getting 40-yard runs like a Dalvin Cook or a Kamara or a McCaffrey, but that those 3 and 4 yard runs in the first quarter turn into 7 and 8 yard runs in the fourth quarter. It'll be interesting to see who can do that in this game. I like both backs.
Yeah, Saquon Barkley going against Chicago. Look, Chicago's got a good defense. I think their offense is their detriment, and that could help us out a lot. But Saquon's hasn't really been awesome. He's a little banged up, man.
Yeah, but so was Todd Gurley coming in against the Bears last week, and he did it. And Saquon's a stronger version of him.
I mean, look, I know that a lot of people are calling to have Saquon rest. Not yet. If he is banged up, let him go at least a couple more, and then maybe towards the end of the season when all's said and done, at which point Wayne Gallman's a guy to look towards. Another guy I want to bring up, coming off a bye week and has had a phenomenal season and leads the league in touchdowns, is Aaron Jones Sunday night traveling to San Francisco. What do you think?
I don't know this for certain because their offense has become a lot more unpredictable than in the past. But I kind of said this when we talked about a little bit about
Aaron Jones game or Aaron Rodgers game?
Aaron Rodgers, because Aaron Rodgers heading back to California, playing in the Bay Area where his college is at. Also the team that passed him up for Alex Smith. I've mentioned it before. These guys have a tendency that the superstars find the littlest motivations and turn them into big motivations. And I don't know. And plus San Francisco's run defense is pretty freaking good. So, they got guys that can chase
and look,
around.
Again, if you have Aaron Jones, you're firing him up. Okay.
Yeah.
More than likely, you don't have 2 or 3 other options that are going to trump him.
Right.
But it's an interesting thought process because we have seen weeks when when Aaron Rodgers is blowing it up, Jones's week is ho-hum.
Yeah.
And so what will you see there? Let's talk about some potential guys at the running back position, maybe waiver wire targets this week. It is Wednesday, so waiver wire's over, but based on matchups, and if you need somebody as a RB2 or a flex, who might stand to serve you best?
Some ones that may be interesting. I still, I don't know that this is really probably in the flex RB1. If he's healthy, David Montgomery, more so. The Giants do have some issues on defense, but also Bears, we all know the situation. Mitch Trubisky was pulled. Supposedly it was for an injury. If Mitch plays, they're still going to lean on the running game, and if Chase plays, they're still going to lean on the running game. So I think he'll get some looks. So he's a little bit more attractive this week, given the fact that the Bears' offense is not really well thought of for the right reasons. Again, I mentioned Kareem Hunt still playing in there. We got to figure out who the Pittsburgh backfield is going to be. Connor went back down again with a shoulder injury, and whether he'll play, but that could be an opportunity for Jalen Samuels against Cincinnati. That's pretty hapless.
Yeah, I mean, the only concern there is when this situation rose before, we ended up thinking that, but then Samuels still was that pass catching back, and all of a sudden Trey Edmonds came in and was taking most of the running duties.
Yep.
With Mason Rudolph, bad week last week. We don't. You don't really know what to say about him right now. I don't think there's enough on him. I think he's just still too raw. But I will say, when they game planned for that game, and even before that with Connor and Samuels, when Mason Rudolph got his first start, or came back from injury, I'm sorry, they definitely game planned involved both the backs, and both of them had fantasy production.
Right.
What about the Atlanta backfield? Last week, the name that everybody was clamoring for was Brian Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes in and kind of throws up a dud this week, and I don't think it's really necessarily to his detriment, but there was a point where they did score a rushing touchdown on the ground.
Got called back, yep.
No, but they scored a rushing touchdown. Not the one that he might have got called back, but it wasn't him. It was the other guy, Ogbanawe or whatever. His Ogunbowale or whatever.
He had one. Brian Hill did have one called back for a holding call, I believe. It was what it was for.
My point is that the next time we saw them in close, and they ran the ball and scored off of it, and it wasn't Hill.
Yeah.
So and I think everybody's dropping them. So,
it's a tough matchup. I will say this too: Tampa, while they are susceptible to giving up a lot of points, it's generally through the air.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit of a tough matchup. One that's kind of interesting to me, and I really kind of got to look into, is Washington's running game.
Yeah, well, that's why I bought Geis up.
Yeah, because you got him. I mean, if Geis is going to be the man, this would be a good team to get it rolling against. I think it's a game where Washington can stay in it, so they won't be forced to go to the pass. They certainly, I think, want to protect their young quarterback. We did in our Good, Bad, the Ugly. There was a pretty pathetic scene from the offensive line with Haskins literally begging them to block for him.
And they kind of shrugged him off. And look, dude, I mean, I think that even if he was a phenomenal quarterback as a rookie, it's because he's a rookie, you'd still want to make sure you had a solid run game to help him out.
Right. And I think there'll be some extra motivation on the offensive line because it got some press and it made them look really bad. So I think they could, and Detroit's a team that can get run on. And again, without Stafford, it's not like they're going to put up this huge amount of points. So it allows that running game to stay in, and that is clearly the best part of their offense. So, again, if Geis is healthy enough, I think they start to hand it to him, and he could be an interesting play. He could blow it up. But, problem is Peterson, when he gets against bad defenses, can run well with that offense. And so, I don't know. It'll be an interesting play.
Tell me about the Miami backfield. I know it's Miami, but somebody's got to run the ball there.
I guess it's Balaj. Did they pick up anybody else?
Well, they have this other guy, Patrick Laird.
Okay.
Who they have, and he, there we go. Let me get off of that. So Laird last week had one carry, I think, for 7 yards. I don't know what his reception is. He must have had a touchdown because he had 12.3. I think he did. But we've said before, like I just don't think Kalen Ballage is an NFL running back. Now
I agree.
I don't know enough about Patrick Laird to anoint him, but if Miami is thinking and seeing what we're seeing, and based on where they are at in the season, no harm, no foul in trying this other guy out.
Yep. Yeah. Oh no, I agree. I mean, they just kind of have run into a nightmare. They kind of created their own nightmare with I mean, it's not like Walton was going to play anyway, but now he's gone.
They go to Cleveland. Yep. I don't know, man. I don't know if it depends on the depth of your league and the situation you're in, but there might be some value. I'd say this. If you're going to look at Ballage or Laird, I would just take the shot on Laird because I think you know what you're going to get out of Ballage and hope for maybe something good to come out of Laird. If you're going to take a shot on one of those two guys, if it's a decision that you've got them or you need someone to replace them, those are two guys you're toggling with, I'd rather take the shot on what Laird might be able to do than going with Ballage and knowing what he's probably going to do.
Yep. That makes sense.
What about the Indianapolis backfield? Now that Marlon Mack has a hand fracture, we know that they've got Nyheim Hines, they've got Jordan Wilkins. Typically from what we saw with Mack in there and without him, Hines is that third down pass catching back.
They ran Jonathan Williams.
Yep, Wilkins. I'm getting there. Wilkins will come in and spell him, and he's probably the better of the two rushing running backs between Hines and Wilkins. But as you said, in comes Jonathan Williams this week. He gets 13 touches for 116 yards. Actually has a pretty good day. Put up in our league 23.2 fantasy points, and quite frankly, it looks like Jordan Wilkins is questionable. So there you go. There. Since Wilkins is questionable, maybe leave him out of the scenario. If you had to choose between a Nyheim Hines or Jonathan Williams, what is your thought there? What's your move?
Well, here's my feeling. Third down backs are third down backs for a reason. And so I see a lot like if you watch teams that have like good third down backs, even when someone gets hurt, I'll give you a perfect example. Houston.
That's who they're playing this week.
Right. But Houston had Duke Johnson, right? When they came in and they went and signed Carlos Hyde, they stuck with Carlos Hyde as the thumper and kept him in that role. If Jonathan Williams can continue I think they're going to play him as the hot hand, and the Texans can be had on the ground. So if that happens, I would go Jonathan Williams. I think he's going to get the touches. There's a reason why they brought him in and gave him those touches, and he created opportunities with them. I don't think you necessarily always just take your third down back and try to shift him into the next man up role. You find a guy that fits that Marlon Mack role more and continue to keep like Hines in that role where he's been.
All right, before we move on to wide receivers for next week, I do want to stay on running backs and talk about some backfields in the NFL. And as you sit now, you've either locked up a playoff spot or about to, or you're out of it, or you're in the hunt. That's really any situation you could be in. So I say that to say because these guys are probably rostered, and we'll start with Kansas City. Damian Williams goes out with an injury. LaShawn McCoy comes in, did everything he could, had an okay day, not great. What's the next guy in line? The other
Darren Williams.
Darren Williams. He scored, I think, one of the touchdowns, but didn't have a great day on the ground last week. I'll say this. And I have Damian Williams in a league that is a 12-man league, and he has been very hard whether I'm going to slot him in or not. The depth on the running back waiver is not out there. So there's pickings are very slim.
Yep.
I dropped Damian Williams this week.
Okay.
And if I were, and they are on a bye, that was part of it coming up this week, and I needed to grab somebody else, really more for looking forward for my playoff run, because when my bench spots now are not just bench spots to play with every week or look at matchups or have a good opportunity. My bench spots now need to be occupied by guys that may really have some forward value to
somewhere.
head towards the playoffs.
Right.
Based on what matchups are coming. This is going to be good. Okay. The Kansas City backfield, I got to be honest, I'd do away with it altogether. Don't even put yourself in the situation of should I play him, should I not play him. I don't think you're going to know. I don't think it's that great. And I know Andy Reid is a great coach, great offensive mind, and he knows how to run the ball. I just, not to say you won't see a good week out of McCoy this week or Damian Williams down the line. The consistency's not there.
Yep.
And there are other options, I even think, on a low-end random running back that could be more consistent the rest of the way than these guys.
Yeah, let me say that this is what I believe. And again, I've got Patrick Mahomes, so obviously I pay close attention to Kansas City. Here's the deal. Kansas City was not playing great right before Mahomes got hurt with the kneecap. And their offense looked a little out of sync. I think through the first probably 6-7 games of the year, Kansas City was looking at their backfield, trying to figure out who the guy is. I believe Kansas City is, at this point, decided that they don't like any of their running backs. And note that this was a team many expected to kind of roll that division and, riding on getting the offense rolling and being able to beat up on some teams that weren't, slated to be that good. And so what I think really happened now is now they're in a battle. They got the Raiders chomping at their heels, and the Raiders are looking really balanced. And Kansas City is anything but balanced. And I think right now they are going to put the rest of this season completely on the arm of Mahomes because they think it's their only shot. I think you're going to see McCoy get played, but they don't like him because he drops the ball. He doesn't run.
He actually fumbled again, but he was fortunate to have it bounce right back into his gullet.
Yeah, I think they're going to do everything but try to, but run the ball. So not only is it's not like just pick your guy. I think it's even when you pick that guy, they will not be significantly involved. It might happen here and there where they get a hot hand and they roll with them. But I think right now the only thing I feel real confident in is that Kansas City is going to draft a running back in the first or second round next year.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's going to be some good ones out there at that point.
Yep. Okay. Here's some other teams that I really think you just need to let it go.
Okay.
Let it go with Frozen 2 coming out. I have a little girl. Let it go. Let it go. New England. I have Sony Michel, their lead back on one of my teams. I think I played him 1 week. Just not happening for him. And with Burkhead and with James White and with what's the other guy's name? Something with the B in his last name. I can't remember.
Burkhead?
No, not Burkhead. The other guy.
Bolden?
Bolden. It's just too much to play with. And this is critical times. If you're out of it, it doesn't matter. But if you're in it or you're fighting to be in it, these are guys you can't mess with in my mind. You just got to leave them be. Detroit. Well,
if you haven't figured out to leave Detroit's backfield alone like 3 weeks ago.
Leave it alone. I know Bo Scarborough
looked
fun, and I know they've got Washington this week, and their defense isn't very good, and they give it up to running backs. Leave it alone. Tampa Bay. We saw the oncoming of Ronald Jones. High-flying name off the wire a couple weeks ago because a lot of people dropped him when he was injured. Mm-hmm. And then this week he doesn't really do so great. And, hey, what do you know? Peyton Barber scores a touchdown.
It's a bad backfield, and it's not consistent.
Leave it alone. Besides, they throw the ball way more. Washington, we touched on it. I mean, unless you need it, and preface all this with unless you absolutely have to, you have no other choice to start a guy from one of these teams.
Washington, you could at least get a matchup from.
Yeah, you might be able to. We think Geis is the guy, but maybe it's AP. Neither of them are high-flying. They're fringe RB2, more on the RB3 flex, and maybe even fringe there. But the fact that you can't always tell, stay away from it. Indianapolis, now that Mac is gone, there's some value to be had because of the matchups, especially with Houston here and trying to stay in the game. It's too much of a guessing game. Pittsburgh with Connor out, it's a guessing game. How about San Francisco? They run the ball, one of the best teams in the league. And I have Tevin Coleman. And the week he went nutty, he was sitting on the bench. And since then, every week I'm like, do I play him? Do I play him? 1 week I did. Do I play him? Do I play him? Then Breida has a week. Then Breida's hurt. And then Mostert. And then Jeff Wilson. Jerry. I don't know. As great as their backfield is, it's not as porous as some of these other teams in their backfields in their rushing attacks. As great as that backfield is, especially with the line, 2 tight end sets, fullback, you might be playing a guessing game.
Yep.
Now, I'm not saying don't play Tevin Coleman. He's definitely a solid RB2 flex. Probably the rest of the way if you have to, if you've got no other choice. But don't get it twisted. It is a guessing game. And there are weeks where Breida gets more out of the backfield than Tevin, even though he's the starter. And even both of those guys can end up taking a back seat to Mostert and Wilson vulturing touchdowns, which you need. And at this point, you really need, because it's not just about the points to get you the win. It's about the points to put you in the right slot, because most leagues go by record and then points.
Yep.
So that's all I have to say about that. Let's talk about wide receivers for next week.
Okay.
What do you think?
Number one out there right now, and justified, I like the matchup, is Julio. Julio because Julio wasn't as involved last week. Julio because he's going up against Tampa Bay. Atlanta has found a little bit of a resurgence. I like them. Michael Thomas, I don't have to say anymore. DeAndre Hopkins, I liked what I saw. It seems like he's getting a little bit more engaged. Last week kind of was a stinker for Houston as a whole, but I still think he's going to be more.
Kind of the only thing that looked good about them.
And I think that bodes well for them against Indianapolis. They're going to have to play against that team. It's kind of more who I don't like.
Right, who don't you like?
Well, I got a lot of concerns about Tampa because you got a couple factors. You got the good Jameis, bad Jameis, and you got 2 receivers that are lighting it up this year overall in Godwin and Evans. But they're also playing the Falcons, who all of a sudden have found this pass rushing defense, and that's not Jameis Winston's best world. So it's a gamble more than it's been in previous weeks.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna fire them up. They're wide receiver ones. Both of them, in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, you got Odell against Miami, which sounds so juicy, but then I look at what they're doing with their backfield and the fact that if the game gets out of hand, do they kind of shut it down? I mean, there is a possibility they could showcase him.
Jarvis is the guy that's been getting it done.
Yeah,
there. With the past 3 weeks, he's been getting it done. And, there was a lot of conversation to the fact that, well, now Jarvis has been working with Baker longer than Odell.
Yep.
And now maybe it's starting to click, and maybe the Odell thing won't click till next year when they have a little more time under their belt together.
Sure. Well, guys, I really like. I like Seattle's receivers. I like Tyler Lockett. I love me some DK Metcalf on the cheap as you can get him.
If you're deep, if you need it deep, you might even see a Josh Gordon sighting.
Yeah, you might.
Because Philly is not good in the secondary. The front's good, but no, they'll put pressure on Russell Wilson, no doubt, and he'll scramble out of the pressure, and somebody will get open, and he's firing.
Yep. I like the connection with the quarterback and the receiver. I like DJ Chark.
Yep.
I like him. I like Devontae Adams to blow it up.
Off of a bye, I think so as well.
I like him to blow it up.
I think Juju will be out this week.
Yep.
But it looks like Sterling Shepard is going to come back for the Giants. That's somebody that's probably out on the waiver wire that, look, Evan Ingram's out with Saquon. Is he banged up? Is he not banged up? That front for Chicago is still who they are. They can rise up. It's in Chicago. And if we're going to get anything done on that defense, I think it's going to have to be through the air, even with the running backs through the air. But I think that's where it's going to be more on Daniel Jones. But that could be someone to look at if you need somebody to slot in that's not out there. Calvin Ridley should have another good opportunity this week. But he's been hot and cold.
Yep. I like Amari Cooper for this reason.
You have him on your team?
That's an ancillary bonus.
Mm-hmm.
No, but here's why. Like, Dallas just played a pretty poor team and blew them up, and they could be more creative on their offense. Now they're going to go against one of the best defenses in the NFL in New England, and when it comes down to having to play the tight window, I need to go to the guy that's most reliable. There's no doubt that that's Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper shows up in tough games. That's the one thing I'll say about him. He is going to play this week, according to Jerry Jones. There's just, I mean, one, he's been good all year, but I just look at it, I kind of just the same way with Devontae Adams. If you're going to go play against San Francisco, and I'm putting the game on my Hall of Fame quarterback's shoulders, and who's that guy gonna trust? He's gonna trust Devontae Adams. I think it's kind of the same scenario with Amari Cooper. When games are tough, those guys come down to it.
I mean, my concern there is they're playing the Pats, dude. And the Pats
they
still,
are.
in my mind, have the best D in the league, and the best part of their defense is the backside.
Right, but my point is, if you're going to have to go and score, you're going to have to try to score.
Well, I mean,
who are you going to sling the ball to?
Well, if you're throwing it, you're going to probably say, but look, don't get it twisted. Tony Pollard came in and took some passes. Zeke can still catch the ball. They're going to be run-focused because I think they know that's where they can take advantage of New England. Now, that said, I still think that Belichick's goal is to take Zeke out of this game.
Yeah, so again, I think Amari Cooper's going to get the looks, and that's what it comes down to, and he gets the ball. So how
about a little Jamison Crowder? Right now, he's been picked up as of late in several leagues.
Yep.
Darnold has kind of picked it up a little bit with his game since the disastrous game they had against New England, but and in Jacksonville for that matter, but. Since the past 3 weeks, Cooper has, in our league, put up 22 points, 19 points, 18 points, respectively. Yep. Slot receiver, definitely a go-to guy, reliable.
He gets the targets.
I mean, he's got, those past 3 weeks, we're talking 9 targets, 8 receptions, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 8 targets, 5 receptions. So he's gotten 83 yards, 81 yards, 76 yards, respectively, in those 3 weeks, and has scored 1 touchdown every week in those 3 weeks.
Yeah.
He's a guy that probably not out there, but definitely has his consistency right now. And they got Oakland this week, and the floor that he has right now, he's somebody you could definitely fire up as wide receiver 3 if you had to, and he's out there.
Yeah, one that's going to be kind of interesting to me, and I don't know this answer. I'm going to have to do a little bit of research. We talked about this with Tyreek Hill one week early in the year when I think it was actually his first week of the year when we were talking about Jacksonville. Is who is Jalen Ramsey going to match up on in this game? Jalen Ramsey is physical enough to take Mark Andrews out of the game. He is. But does he go on Marquise? Where is Jalen Ramsey going to be?
I think they have to, because I think they have to have him play, and because they run a much more. We talked about this last week. As great as Marquise Brown is, when he's had his when he's had his good days or blow up days in fantasy, there's still only like 4 or 5 targets that he sees in doing that. So he's either ultra productive with those little amount of targets or flat.
Right, but the question
is he only sees the field for 40, 50, 60% of all the offensive snaps.
So who do you think that Jalen Ramsey
needs to be? They need to have him. It might be Andrews or another tight end, but they'll run 2-3 tight end sets regularly, and he's going to have to be involved in stopping that tight end production.
Well, if that's the case, then Marquise Brown may not be a bad play because the rest of that secondary doesn't really excite me. I saw them play last week. Jalen Ramsey has taken whoever your guy is, and he's taken him out of the game. He has been had very few times in his career. He can be had by some of the better receivers at times, but this is the part that makes it interesting, is it could be someone like Marquise Brown doing something like that. I'm trying to look to see. I will tell you, you're giving me the list of guys to not play. I got to say this, unfortunately, because he is on my team. Galladay has lost all value, unfortunately. Jeff Driscoll is not the guy to move the ball downfield.
I mean, he's been
a stud for a year and a half.
2 all year by far, with definitely wide receiver 1 games in there.
Yeah. They are playing Washington, so he might get a little love this week. But overall, their passing game with Driscoll is bad. And it's only going to get worse. And he's in an unfortunate situation because when you bring a guy in like Driscoll in a scenario with Stafford, what do you hope to do? oh, do I have a running game to lean on? Remember we said that died a couple weeks earlier when Kerryon Johnson went down, and they just had to be the Lions of the past. Well, now last I saw was that he's out for 6 weeks, which is pretty much the rest of the year, if not the rest of the year. So those are guys to worry about.
I like, look, well, before I go to I have John Brown, as I said, great week last week. Little concern this week. It is at home, but it is Denver. Denver's defense, especially their secondary. He'll get Chris Harris.
Chris Harris, yeah.
And he's one of the best. I hope, because I have him in all 3 of my leagues, T.Y. Hilton comes back. We talked about who can be the game changer for Indianapolis in a game like this against Houston. I totally believe it's T.Y. Hilton if he's involved in better than 75% or better. Because if he's not, then that's going to be a tough call for a lot of folks. You really got to pay attention to his practice status this week and how he looks going in. There was a lot of thought that he would play this week, but from my understanding, he didn't practice. He hasn't practiced this far this week.
And the killer is he's a Thursday night game
and
too.
It's a Thursday night game, so you really need to pay attention to it.
He is not ruled out though. They've made that point that just came out this morning. He is not ruled out, but he's got to. In this quote I see, got to check all the boxes. I don't know what that means. I mean, I get the gist. He has to be healthy, but I don't know what every single box is. But it's tough to bring guys back on Thursday night.
Yep. And then the wide receiving core, really one of the 2 guys for Carolina, DJ Moore. New Orleans has a pretty good defense. Lattimore should be back. He was out last week against Tampa Bay. And DJ Moore's the number 1, so it'll be a tough time. But I got to tell you, he's produced all year, and as of late, it's every week that you see him produce, regardless of who's their quarterback. Yep. I mean, I'm looking the last 3 weeks, 18 points, 22 points, 17 points, respectively. He's getting the targets, 10, 11, and 15, respectively, and he's had 7, 9, and 8 receptions off those, respectively. Has been at 100 yards, 101, 120, and 95. He doesn't see the end zone. If you were to add an end zone, a touchdown to 1 or 2 or even all 3 of these, he is one of the top receivers every week. Mm-hmm. So it's something to watch. I know he's got a tough matchup against Lattimore in New Orleans this weekend, but they're going to have to, if New Orleans is the New Orleans like we're used to seeing, you have to get him involved somehow.
Yep.
So that should be interesting. Let's see. Is there anyone else on here I really wanted to touch on? Nah, I mean, there's some guys.
Maybe somebody that is on your waiver wire right now to look at if you're really kind of struggling, because he's shown some ability to get the catches. Is Hunter Renfrow is a name to keep an eye on. I mean, because ever since he had that 60-yard, 5-catch, he's been doing that. Now, he hasn't gotten the touchdown every time, but the point is, if you're struggling and you got to find a guy, there's a guy I feel pretty confident could get you in a PPR, with a point per reception. You would be looking at maybe 11, 12 points minimum. He scores a touchdown, you got a pretty strong day at 18 points.
Yeah, and the last guy I want to kind of bring up here on the wide receiver conversation is Pittsburgh wide receiver James Washington. The only reason I bring that up, Juju's out, Deontay Johnson's out.
Tom Johnson. Sorry.
No, Deontay Johnson.
Who's Deontay Tom? Oh, he used to play receiver.
So, this isn't
Settle down.
It's not unusual to be loved by you. It's not Tom Jones. Yeah. So Washington, look, there's really, for the mere fact there's not many other options there. Yep. And Connor's down. He's going to probably see more targets. Whether he produces on those, we'll have to see. But, if you're desperate, you need that third wide receiver, you want to drop a wide receiver in the flex because you have no better options. It is Cincinnati they're playing this weekend, so it's not too daunting of a task. So there could be some potential. And again, I know they got this Johnny Holton guy, and they got a couple other guys. Right now, he's the most experienced of that wide receiving core. And, he can play the deep ball. So, we'll see. That might be something. Let's jump into quarterbacks.
All right. Again, completing the theme, stay away from Detroit.
Yes.
All the way around. So, like, play Lamar Jackson? Yes,
yeah, you're playing Lamar. In terms of who I think the best quarterback will be this weekend, will be his running mate in the MVP race, and that's Russell Wilson. I think he's going to have be the best quarterback of the week.
You think fantasy-wise?
Fantasy-wise, yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
I think that Russell Wilson doesn't care about the MVP race, but he does hear the narrative. He's a gamer. The guy is experienced. I know they're going on the road across the country to Philly. Their defense, they're, again, good front, bad backside. And the things that Russell Wilson can do as a quarterback will give that good defensive front in Philadelphia problems. And just, it could be a field day. It could be a field day. I mean, and I'm not talking about your prime candidates in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Again, I brought up Josh Gordon could be involved.
Yep.
Jacob Hollister at tight end, I think, is going to be heavily involved. This is a day that I think, at the right time, that Russell Wilson could go crazy.
Yep. I can understand that. Probably one that's a little bit more of a surprise, maybe not benched or roster, is Matt Ryan against Tampa. Again, they've kind of gotten it going. Tampa's pass defense is a little rough, so he's an opportunity there. Again, I think Aaron Rodgers is going to have a big week. I think he's just going to have to. I think they're going to put the game on his shoulders.
Dallas goes to New England. What about those two guys?
I mean, Tom Brady, no, because
he's the GOAT. But look, they're winning. He hasn't had to get crazy with them winning, and I think until it's called upon, they'll keep winning the way they're winning. Now, on the flip side, Dak, the number one quarterback in fantasy last week, especially if Belichick decides to take Zeke out of the game, that's the weapon he's going to take away from that offense.
Yep.
Then it is going to be all on Dak.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, Breeze had a pretty good rebound, didn't throw for a ton.
Wait a minute. It is going to be all on Dak, but you're talking about a really good defense in secondary, so how's he going to fare?
He's not.
Okay.
He's not.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not playing him in fantasy.
But if you have him, you probably have to, no?
Well,
depends on who else.
I don't know. I mean, like if Matt Ryan's available.
Here's one, and I'm fighting with this because not in our league because I also have Russell Wilson, but I have in all my leagues Josh Allen, and I was able to play him last week because Russ was on a bye.
Right.
Had a great week, totally expected. He's been solid this year. I did expect more from him simply because he has the running capability, yet we haven't seen him run like he has last year, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that he's able to sling the ball a little more in terms of from an NFL perspective rather than a fantasy perspective. But he's got a tough matchup with Denver this week. And I got to be honest, the only league I have two quarterbacks is our league, him and Russ. The other two leagues that I'm in, I only have Josh Allen. So I'm looking at potentially maybe picking someone up specifically because I'm not sure about this matchup. One of the guys I picked up in my ESPN league is Daniel Jones against Chicago. I honestly think Daniel Jones will have a better day this weekend than Josh Allen in terms of fantasy production.
Good. I don't like the Josh Allen matchup for several reasons, but I that could be very well possible. I mean, you're running a risk, unfortunately, because you've got some good quarterbacks against some tough matchups. That kind of like, you've got Deshaun Watson against Indianapolis, which doesn't mean Deshaun Watson won't have a good day, but the chance of him having those massive days is a little bit diminished against that defense. Still highly rated because he can. Because, I mean, let's just be honest, it's Deshaun Watson. He can. Breeze against Carolina is probably a good play. There's some of those, but, I don't like that matchup. Tom Brady versus Dallas and Dak versus New England. I don't like those matchups. Jameis Winston, even if you get good Jameis, Atlanta's kind of figured out a different way of playing right now, so there's risk there.
But again, even on a bad day, he can give you a decent enough floor to maybe keep you in it if you have no other options.
Right. But so when I kind of look down the list and try to look for maybe some of those, maybe one that might be a decent play could be Derek Carr against the Jets. Derek Carr might only get you 280 yards and 2 scores, but if you're stuck in a tough situation, I mean, I've seen where Dak, throws up, 12 points.
Yeah,
against good defense.
Carr averages about 30 passing attempts a week.
Yeah.
Okay, and he averages probably about between the 250, 300 mark in yardage, just under 3 yardage, just under 300 yards. Last week set up to be a great matchup with him going to Cincinnati, and a lot of people were talking about him as a play, maybe even a DFS play, and he did solid. 29 attempts, 25 completions, 292 yards, 1 TD, 1 pick, but it was a 23.28 fantasy point production against a team that I think knew the Jets' defense is better than Cincinnati's, and I'm just worried about it. Who I do think might actually be a good play is Brissett this week, especially if he's out there on the wire. Last time they played Houston, the guy put up 38 fantasy points, had 4 touchdowns on them, and Houston's defense has been garbage, even more so since that game.
Yeah, that's legit.
How about any other flyers to look at?
I'm not seeing a whole lot I like. I mean, you could go with like a Mason Rudolph against Cincinnati, but I don't
think Daniel Jones
it.
is a potential flyer if he's out there.
Maybe even Ryan Fitzpatrick against Cleveland. Depends on what Cleveland team shows up. That's a possibility.
How you feeling, Nick Foles? Not yet. Need another week. If you're a Mahomes owner.
Tennessee's tough defense. That's their only real challenge. So I don't know. It's a potential. I mean, I would say that's a potential if you're struggling. That's a potential because there is. I mean, he does throws the ball deep. He's DJ Chark. He's got that connection. He's got a big arm, so that's definitely a possibility.
All right, let's talk about our tight ends really quick and then end this.
All right. So on the tight end spectrum, you got your big plays. I like this. I think the Philadelphia tight ends, and you're going to see that they're going to get ranked higher. I like both of them going against Seattle. They're really thin at wide receiver in Philadelphia. Nelson Aguilar is going to be their number one. He's going to get strapped to probably, I think, Shaquem Griffin, or it doesn't even really matter. He's going to get strapped to the best corner they got. I think that's going to open up a little bit of the middle of the field. I do like Jacob Hollister against Philadelphia because Seattle just uses tight ends, and especially in the scoring areas. So I think that's a good look. Mark Andrews is a good play for obvious reasons. I like Waller against the Jets. These are some really good, I think, good plays out there. Haven't seen a status on Kittle yet, but obviously if you've got him and he's playing, you're playing him. So that one's pretty obvious. Maybe even to take a Ryan Griffin. I mean, again, he keeps just finding the end zone. He's not necessarily always putting up huge yards, but that's kind of where I look at. I mean, I like the Philadelphia tight ends a lot in this game just because I think that's where they have to go in the passing game.
I mean, it looks like Austin Hooper is still questionable. Don't know if he's going to be back. I did go out because I have Hunter Henry in a couple of my leagues, and I'm not going to drop him for certain. This is one of those times on a bye where I'm going to keep him and put him on the bench. He's a good tight end, especially down the stretch, regardless of Rivers. Actually, that's his only safety blanket, I feel like, where you can count on him not throwing an interception when he's throwing to him. But due to the fact that he's out, I did go out and get Jacob Hollister for Seattle. Yep. I think he'll be heavily involved. He has been. He's done great being in there. I think another guy out there, if you're looking, and I don't know if you brought up Pittsburgh.
No.
Vance McDonald. A lot of preseason hopes for him. Didn't really pan out. He's had a couple weeks here that's been all right. Again, I'm going back to the narrative of James Conner's out. Juju Smith-Schuster's out. Deontay Johnson's out. Cincinnati. This guy is, that security blanket at tight end for Mason Rudolph. He's not consistently throwing deep balls. It's going to be the short to intermediate stuff, dink and dunk down the field. And Vance McDonald could be heavily involved and very possibly catch a touchdown.
I can see it.
Yep. So, look, Kittle may still be out. If that's the case, Ross Dwelly can come into play again. I know Green Bay's defense is better, but they use those tight ends. Noah Fant has, you just don't know. But the past couple games, he's shown up some. I don't know if I can trust that a whole lot. But again, you're going against the team. In the where am I? In Buffalo, that's typically got a pretty decent defense, especially from the facing aerial attacks, and maybe that's a guy that they can get involved in the game. So I'm not sure. I wouldn't, if you have your option between like a Hollister or a Fant or a like Ryan Griffin, I'm leaning Hollister. Then maybe Griffin, then maybe Fant. I do like Vance McDonald a lot this week in particular for the game that they're going into, just because he's definitely a part, and Russ spreads it around. That's going to wrap it up. Is that it?
Yep.
Okay. We ran a little over an hour, but that's season-long fantasy. We'll cut it up. We'll get back at you with our daily fantasy goodness. We appreciate you listening. See you as always
on the gridiron.
Have a nice day.